Diocese of Paisley podcast is proudly sponsored by Concilium Contracting Services, your Paisley family-owned company, one call for all trades, available 24/7. Welcome to the Diocese of Paisley podcast, with me, Vanda. Now, before we crack on with this week's episode, I need to ask for a favour. We all need to hear some good news at the moment, so I am appealing to you, the parishioners of the Diocese of Paisley, to come forward with your good news and inspirational stories for a new podcast series that we are producing. Maybe a special intention that you have been praying for has been granted. Perhaps your faith has helped you through a tricky situation and you've come out on top. Maybe you're even a volunteer who has gone above and beyond for their community. However faith has shaped your life, we would love to hear from you. You can get in touch by emailing me directly. That's vanda@rcdop.org.uk, or send us a message on Facebook. Now back to the podcast where I went to meet Monsignor John Tormey from Saint John the Evangelist in Barrhead. Father Tormey, welcome to the Diocese of Paisley podcast.
Thank you, Vanda. I'm very happy to be able to join you this morning and hope you're well.
How long have you been a priest?
So I was ordained a priest in 1981 by Bishop Stephen McGill, and I've been a priest now for 44 years.
And how long have you been here at Saint John's the Evangelist?
Just over a year and a half.
Can we start by talking about, so you are a Monsignor.
Yes.
So can we talk about kind of the roles within the church and how you become a Monsignor? How did all that come about for you?
Well, basically a priest likes to be called father because that represents his relationship with the people that he serves. So sometimes a priest is given the title of Monsignor, usually to represent the bishop in some specific role. So when I was diocesan treasurer and therefore one of the three trustees of the Diocese of Paisley, I had to represent the bishop at meetings, financial meetings mostly. And so Bishop John Moen promoted me to be a Monsignor to represent him. So it's more a kind of representational thing. And a Monsignor is a papal chaplain, actually. It's a nice honour for a priest to have that. But it usually is given in view of a specific function that the diocese, that the priest would do in the diocese. However, Pope Francis made a rule that you could only become a Monsignor, I think, after you were 60. So I was very lucky. I became a Monsignor at the tender age of 45. So that's me. So there is a wee joke, of course. What is the difference between a Monsignor and a priest? And the answer is you put your hand to one side and say, there is no difference, but don't tell the Monsignor. I'm glad you laughed. My jokes are as bad as that. So that's, but then later on, Bishop John Moen asked me to join the chapter of canons of the Diocese of Paisley, and that is in recognition of many years' service, and many priests are asked to become canons as a result of having given many years' service to the diocese. And so myself and many other priests are also canons. So if you were to say my name properly, it would be Monsignor John Canon Tormey. The canon comes before the surname. That's why if you're addressing it, a letter, that's how you would say it. So. But again, the canon is a lovely thing because it's more about prayer. It's to pray for the work of the bishop and the diocese, and to meet together as we are supposed to do maybe 3 or 4 times a year, to pray for the diocese and to pray for the bishop and his work.
Now, how does that fit in with the hierarchy of the priesthood, like the church and the deacons and the bishops?
Yes, so holy orders is what we are talking about now, and this is part of the hierarchical order of the church. Holy orders are given to men to serve the people. The bishop is the principal pastor of the diocese, and they call his diocese his see or his seat. So the chair represents the bishop's authority, and he is given, as a successor of the apostles, the authority of handing on and maintaining the deposit of faith and of helping the work of the gospel flourish in his particular region, which we call a diocese. So there's a bishop. Now the bishop is helped by priests who are his cooperators, and they work and represent the bishop in his pastoral ministry in individual parishes. So while the bishop can't be in every parish, a priest can be in every parish, and he does the work of preaching the gospel, administering the sacraments, and of looking after the pastoral needs of the parish, that particular parish. That is accompanied by deacons who also are part of the 3 tier of holy orders. So there's bishop, priest and deacon, and bishops are also assisted by deacons, especially at the Eucharist and proclaiming the word of God. They are also able to baptise and to lead funeral rites apart from the Mass, and they can preach. And so they assist the bishop in his ministry, and very often a deacon will be someone who is married and who is appointed to a particular parish to help with one of the priests. And sometimes that deacon can also do work for the diocese. For instance, one of the deacons is helping promote a programme for the preparing families for baptism. So again, the role of the deacon is beginning to flourish in our parishes as well. And of course, we hope that we have a priest for every parish, but nowadays sometimes in certain towns already in our diocese, like Renfrew and Erskine, there is one priest who covers 2 parishes, and that is becoming more and more common. So to help the priest, the deacon can be a great help, especially with things like baptisms and preaching and preparing people for the sacraments, and that's what's happening in our diocese. And the bishop obviously has oversee of all these things. So the hierarchy, if you like, is bishop, priest and deacon. The titles of Monsignor and Canon are not anything really to do with the holy orders as such. They're more honorary titles given in recognition for a priest's number of years of service, or to represent the bishop in a particular work, for instance, like in finance.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about your parish duties. What does a day look like for you?
Well, the first thing about being a priest is it is probably the one way of life which has the most job satisfaction, because it's working with people and it's a very rewarding life. But every day is different. When I say every day is different, obviously one thing that is central to the priest's ministry is celebrating the Mass, and that becomes the centre of everything the priest does. So to say Mass every day is the priest's first duty, and to offer up Mass for the people and their intentions, and to sanctify the people of God, which is part of his preaching. And so preaching, singing the Mass are very much essential to the priest's duties, usually on a Sunday. We also have weekday Masses, of course, and they are great opportunities for the faithful to join the priest and to be able to pray for all the needs of the church. And in particular, like today, we've had a funeral, and I'm very blessed to have an assistant priest in this parish, Saint John's, who is Father Joe McGill, and incidentally he's the great nephew of Bishop McGill, who ordained me a priest in 1981, so there's a lovely connection there. And other things a priest would do, obviously, are, before you came, I was sifting through many emails and trying to do a correspondence, so there's a certain amount of clerical work, if you like, that needs to be done, payment of bills, and you try to have someone who can help you, like I have someone who helps me with the ordering of the office, and there's someone who helps me with dealing with the gift aid and the contributions that people make, so we can claim back gift aid for the weekly donations. So there are many women in the church just now cleaning the church, and we rely on a lot of volunteer helpers to help keep the parish going. So although the priest is in charge of looking after the parish, he of course needs many people who do readings, who help with giving out Holy Communion, who help lead groups like the St Vincent de Paul, the Legion of Mary, the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary prayer group, and we also have people in the hall who come regularly, the after school group, the guides and the rainbows, and the Wednesday club, which is for adults with special needs. So we have a lot of activities, and so therefore the priest has to have an oversight of all these things, but obviously he can't do them all. A priest also goes into the schools. We have 2 primary schools and a secondary school here. Father Joe McGill, whom I mentioned earlier, is the chaplain to the secondary school. But he and I also go into the 2 primary schools of St Mark's and St John's. We visit the classes, we prepare the children, especially for their sacraments of First Communion and First Confession and Confirmation. And we also visit the sick and we bring communion to them. We have the deacon also helps us do that. And in this parish we have a 3-month rota with Father McGill, myself, Father John, and Deacon Dennis Murphy, who take turns, and we go around and visit about 8 or 9 members of our parish community, so that they get regular visits from the clergy. And in addition to that, obviously, we have, for instance, like today, a funeral. When someone dies, we help a family prepare for the funeral. We meet with them, we select hymns and readings, we give them consolation and pray with them. And then the day of the Mass of the funeral, it's a great opportunity to support a family in their time of great loss and sorrow. And many people will say to me the Catholic funeral Mass is one of the most uplifting things they have experienced because of the help that it gives to people. So we do funerals, we do baptisms, we do weddings. Those are the sometimes called the hatches, matches and dispatches. But all that's part of a priest's life. And obviously visiting families at home, and if someone comes to this call room we're sitting in just now, they maybe have a particular problem, they wish to speak with a priest, they phone up and arrange a time to come and see. So in addition to the masses, we also have confessions, which we have every day from 9:30 to 10:15, and then at the weekends we have them on Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon prior to the Vigil Mass. So all those things are kind of part of the pastoral care that a priest offers. It's very varied. Each day can be very different, and central to that day, of course, is the priest's prayer, that he has time to pray himself, to fill himself up with the graces he needs, so that he can be a vessel of an instrument of God's mercy and peace to those he serves.
It's a very busy parish life, isn't it? Do you ever get any downtime to relax?
Oh yes, I have to take time to look after myself, and as you get older you realise you don't have the same energy as you had when you were 25 or 30. So I will do things like I have a day off, which is a Monday, and often I'll have celebrated Mass. I'll go off. In my case, I like to swim, and that's my way of keeping fit. I try to do that 3 times a week. Only takes an hour. Usually a good time is the afternoon when it's quiet, and it's between morning and evening work. I can get a wee chance to go there and have a wee swim. I visit my dad, who's 93, coming up for 93, and visit him my day off, and then usually visit some of my family for the evening for a meal together. So that's some nice downtime. And usually every day I'm kind of busy until about 8 o'clock, and then I'll maybe sit down and listen to some music, read a book, watch some telly or a film, and then try to get to bed at a sensible time so that I can get up in time to say my prayers. And so that's downtime is important. And I do play a wee bit of the piano, which relaxes me, and I enjoy music, and of course it's for me it's a great joy to have that as part of my life.
Do you have any favourite piano pieces that you like to play?
Yes, I like several composers like Beethoven, Chopin, Bach, Mozart, and things like Debussy. So things like the Moonlight Sonata from Beethoven or Clair de Lune by Debussy. Just now I'm trying to learn a prelude by Bach, which is quite mathematical and demands a lot of attention and lots of practice. But I do enjoy a wee, what do you call it, Tinkle on the Ivories, and I like to play some ballads and some jazz as well. So I'm kind of Catholic in my tastes, and I play by ear as well, and read music, so it depends on what I'm doing. And it's very relaxing. Music, I feel, can sometimes say what words can't say. And very often, if I had a busy day or I may be worried about something, playing the piano and playing some nice melodies helps me to work through it in my mind without thinking about it, and can also bring me down and make me feel at peace again. So it's a great gift, music. It's a wonderful thing.
When did you first decide that you wanted to become a priest?
Well, when I'm one of a family of 7, there are 5 boys and 2 girls. So my mother always used to ask the boys, do any of you want to become a priest from a very early age? And I remember, a bit like Pope Leo, when we were young, we used to practice saying the Mass. We'd get a bit of plain bread and we'd roll it out with a milk bottle and then make little hosts with the top of the opening of the bottle. And then it was Latin, it was hoc est enim corpus meum. And then we would have a curtain round us for our vestments, and we would have, my sister was the altar girl, and she would ring the bell. And so it was a natural choice among other choices. And of course, when you get into trouble, you would say to your mum, and I'm certainly not going to become a priest. But in fact, 2 other of my brothers also went away to test their vocations. They came back and they didn't go on, and they're now married. But I left home when I was 12 and went to a junior seminary, Lying Bank, where a marvellous rector there was Father Charlie Renfrew, who became eventually Bishop Charles Renfrew. And Lying Bank was like a kind of boys' town, where I actually started to learn to play the piano. We played football, tennis, we learned lots about literature and painting, and it was a kind of give me the boy and I'll give you the man kind of attitude that he had. It was a wonderful place. And then from there I went on to Blair's College when I was 14 to 18 and did my O-levels and higher. And after that I was asked by my bishop to go to Rome to study at the Gregorian University and at the Scots College, where I spent 7 years in formation and became a priest in 1981 after my 6th year, and went back to finish off a licence in theology for my 7th year. Then when I came out of seminary, I was sent to the St Mary's Cathedral. At that time there were 5 priests in 1982, 5 priests. They had 4 masses a day, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock. And the priest on the 8 o'clock opened the gates of the grounds, and the priest on the 7 o'clock in the evening mass closed the gates of the grounds. So it was quite a big operation in those days, still is, although they don't have so many priests. So after 2 years, the bishop asked me to go out to Rome to act as a philosophy tutor for the students in Rome. And although I had only 2 years experience as a priest, he felt that I could be of help to the staff there. And I was there for 8 years. And in the last 2 years of those 8 years, the bishops asked me to be vice rector of the college. That is to help with the running of the college more than just the tuition of the pupils, the students, I should say. So that was in 1992 when I came back. So I was ordained in 1981. By 1992 I was back in a parish where I went to St Joseph's Greenock for 3 years as an assistant priest under the wonderful Father John Docherty, and along with Father Alec Buchanan. And then in 1995, and by this time priests were not so many, I was appointed parish priest of St Fergus's, Paisley. And so I was not even 40 years old. I was about 35 when I was appointed a parish priest. About 20 years before me, priests would have been appointed a parish priest when they were maybe 50 or 60. So you can see that the kind of the age of the priests being appointed were getting lower. And I was a parish priest in St Fergus's for 5 years, and then went on to St Mary's Greenock for 8 years, and then St Mary's Cathedral as administrator for 8 years, then St Aidan's Johnson for 8 years. I was also chaplain to the hospital then. And then for the last year and a half of my final 8 years, I, as a priest, an active priest, I will be here hopefully in Saint John's till I retire when I'm 75.
So you've certainly had a very varied vocation up to now. What's your favourite thing about being a priest?
I would have to say, of course, that the most important thing for me is the privilege of being able to celebrate Mass and to be very close to Christ in the Eucharist. That for me is fundamental to who I am. In a sense, it's not a job at all, it's a vocation, it's who I am as a person, and it's part of my personal journey as a Christian to be as close as I can to Christ. So for me, I've got the great privilege of celebrating the Mass, and I would say that's perhaps first and foremost the greatest thing about being a priest. But beside that would be, as I said at the start, being a priest is probably if you said it was a job, it's the one with the most job satisfaction, because you're always working with people. You're involved with people's lives when they're in their joyful moments, like a baptism or a marriage, in their time of sorrow, for instance, in suffering, administering to the communion and the sacraments to the sick, and when someone dies, to pray for the repose of their soul and to console the family who are grieving. And then everything in between, from maybe counselling people or accompanying people in their journey of their growth in faith. And of course, going into schools is always wonderful when the children go, "Hello, Father John," and it gives you a wee lift. And so for the young people and the old, you meet people of all ages and all sorts of different things going on in their life. So it's a very varied life, very satisfying, very enjoyable. And sometimes, yes, it's trying. Sometimes you can feel tired and you don't have enough energy. But I wouldn't change being a priest for anything.
What's your favourite time in the church year?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't have a really favourite time, because for me, every day is a good day. But obviously, first of all, the build up to Christmas is always great, and especially the celebration of the birth of Jesus on Christmas. That's a beautiful moment. I always enjoy that. But even more profound is coming up to Easter, when the start of Holy Week particularly, we celebrate the journey of Christ from Palm Sunday and the procession of joy of Christ entering Jerusalem, then to the institution of the Mass on Holy Thursday. And we also have the Mass of Chrism, where we renew our vows as priests, and the people pray for us at the Chrism Mass. And the bishop blesses and consecrates the oils which will be used in the sacraments that the priests use during the coming year. And then Good Friday, which has a tremendous turnout of people coming to listen to the Passion and to venerate the cross of Christ. It's very powerful, very moving, and it is a truly magnificent part of the Church's celebration. And then the celebration of the Easter victory of Christ's resurrection. It's the most joyful of all the liturgies. It is the liturgy of liturgies, celebrating the resurrection. And it has a lot of work to go into it to make it all work. And so, while I would say it's not enjoyable in one sense, as you have to make sure it all goes well, but it is tremendous, and it's the most beautiful thing when you come into the church darkened with the Paschal candle and you sing Lumen Christi, the light of Christ, and everyone replies, Deo gratias, thanks be to God. And everyone takes a candle light from that Paschal candle, and the whole church in darkness becomes filled with the light of everyone. It represents their faith in Christ. It's truly the central moment, or the central liturgy, and it's magnificent. I always tell people, if you've never been to a Easter Vigil celebration, put it on your bucket list. It's one thing you should always have experienced, and hopefully when they've experienced it once, they'll want to come back again. So the celebration of Easter has got to be the most the central point of all liturgies that I would say I enjoy the most.
And tell me, who are your favourite saints?
Well, having been a student in Rome and then going back as a member of college and had the privilege of going around Italy, many saints but particularly St. Francis of Assisi and St. Clare of Assisi, St. Benedict and his sister St. Scholastica, and nearer to home, Saint John Ogilvie and Saint Columba, Saint Fergus, Saint Aidan, and these are obviously people who have been patrons of parishes I've been in, and I suppose there are lots of saints that when you celebrate their feast day, you read a wee bit about their lives, like the Japanese martyrs, St. Paul and Miki and companions, or the Ugandan martyrs, St. Charles Lwanga and companions. And their lives are, an amazing testament to the grace of God working through their lives.
Do you think that if you hadn't been called to become a priest, is there another career that you might have chosen?
Well, clearly I would have hoped if I didn't have a vocation to the priesthood, I would have a vocation to family life, and that would have been, for me, a beautiful thing as well. I've got many nephews and nieces and brothers and sisters, so I can share in the family life and the extended family, and that is a great joy to me. If I was to choose a profession, it might be teaching, but when I was younger, I had this ambition to be a concert pianist, and I remember asking an old priest, what should I do? And he said these very wise words. He says, well, John, if you become a concert pianist, you can't become a priest, but if you become a priest, you can still become a piano player. And that sorted me out.
What's the most challenging thing about being in the priesthood?
Among a few things, I would say one of the most difficult things is when you have to leave a parish, and it's very hard to kind of break contact with the people you've grown to love and to know, and at the same time, it's wonderful to get to know people in a new parish and to come to know them, and it takes time, however, to build up a real relationship with people. So you're a human being. That gets harder as you get older to leave a parish community, and it becomes like a kind of almost like a bereavement. It's a bit a strong word, but it's very hard to leave, and the people too, they get used to their priest, and it's hard for them to let go. But when I was a young priest and went to my first parish in St Mirren's, I was full of the teachings of the church and the energy and enthusiasm to give the people of God the good news. And very quickly, after about 3 months, I realised that many of the people in the parish were a lot more holy than I was, and I was learning from them how to be a Christian, how to be a priest. So there's a lovely relationship between priest and people. That's why, going back to your first question about the title of a priest, the most important title for a priest is father, because it represents his relationship with his people. He's there to care for his people, and that they care for him, and that they pray for him, and they love him, and he loves them. And that's why it's always difficult to leave a parish community, because it is a family of faith, and you grow attached to people. And occasionally I go back, maybe visit someone whom they've maybe asked me to do something, and I'll go back. But I try to keep my mind focused on the present needs of the parish I'm in, so that they get my full devotion and attention. So that's probably the hardest thing, if I was to be honest about it.
And lastly, I would just like to ask, what's your hope for the future for the priesthood?
Well, obviously, and when I started, I was explaining how I was a member of a community of 5 priests, and when I was ordained in 1981, and as the years have gone on, the priests have become less and less in the parishes. My hope would be that young men listening to perhaps this podcast might be inspired to think of their vocation as possibly being a priestly life, because it's a very fulfilling life. And as I said again, I remember an old priest who was 50 years a priest celebrating his anniversary, and he said, boys, there is no job in the world that has greater job satisfaction than being a priest. And that was one of the things that encouraged me as a young seminarian to continue in my vocation, to search for the will of God to be a priest. And I'm so grateful to God that he allowed me to become a priest, It's a calling, it's not a job. It's a calling, it's a way of life. It's a beautiful way of life, and it's a very rewarding way of life. And I would hope that many young men might see the work of the priest that they know in their lifetime and be inspired to maybe follow in their footsteps.
I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Diocese of Paisley podcast. And remember, if you have a good news story or an inspiring story of faith, please get in touch with us. Get in touch with me directly, vanda@rcdop.org.uk, or send us a message on Facebook. And we'll look forward to hearing from you. And as always, please remember to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time.